Silent Hills. Have you heard anything behind like the cancellation of it? Is there? Do you know if there's any chance of anything like that getting resurrected again under Konami and old Kojima Productions, or is that uh, just stop thinking about it because it's never gonna happen? Hello, everybody. Thank you once again for showing up for another installment of our not weekly, well, it has been weekly stream with esteemed guests from all over the gaming industry. I've been very lucky and very fortunate this month to have a lot of great people on board and a lot of cool people willing to take time out of their day or night, in this case, to have to basically just share their knowledge and expertise with us and everyone else who has come on the stream. And that is no different today as I introduce our next guest. He's been a contributor to Unseen64, Did You Know Gaming, Nintendo Life, and has sort of been a master at uncovering the secrets of games long thought lost to time, never to make an appearance again. So again, without further ado, thank you so much to Liam Robertson for coming on. It's good to have you here, Liam.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like I said, your past more than precedes you with all the interesting projects and all the interesting things that you've uncovered. So, thank you so much for taking time. It's midnight where you're at right now, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I'm pretty tired, so I'm gonna let everyone know that my brain is a bit foggy, and I've been up since pretty early, so, just keep that in mind. I might say something stupid, but let's see.
Oh, there's no stupid comments on this channel, that's for sure. So, well, anyway, thank you so much for staying up late. So I'm gonna kind of kick it off like I do with every interview on here. I'd love to get a little background on you. How did you end up to where you're at today? How did you get started on this path, uncovering games that never came out or canceled games?
Oh, well, that's a long story. I think I've always, well, for a very long time, been interested in the subject.
Mm-hmm.
Probably since I was a little kid. I can remember, and I'm sure a lot of us will have these similar memories of looking in game magazines, and in my case, I used to get promotional cassette tapes.
Oh, nice.
For video games before they were coming out, like for GameCube and sometimes N64.
Mm-hmm.
This is the Rumble Pack. The big reason why Star Fox 64 is the coolest cinematic gaming experience there is.
And, you would get these compilation tapes, these DVDs sometimes, and you'd watch them back as a kid because that, this ages me a bit, but back then that is how game news was delivered. You would get DVDs with magazines and stuff like that, right?
Right.
Or you get them from game stores. And so I can remember watching these reels of like, here's the next Nintendo games that are coming to the GameCube.
Mm-hmm.
And I got one around the launch of the GameCube, and I can remember like half those games never came out. I was waiting a long time for Donkey Kong Racing, not really understanding why that never came out or why Dinosaur Planet changed into Star Fox Adventures as it did and all that. So, these things weigh on you as a kid, and I went looking for the answers as I got a little bit older, and I found Unseen64, which is this site that archives the history of console video games. And I think, it's kind of interesting. You're not really born, or you're not really born with the inherent knowledge that projects like that get cancelled, right? It's something that you have to figure out for yourself, because when you're a little kid, games just seemingly come from thin air. They're delivered by storks or something, right?
You don't just really appear, right?
Yeah. Someone off somewhere makes them, and then they make them, and then they appear. And so, yeah, it's kind of confusing when you were a kid, but figuring all that out on my own, left me very interested. And I found Unseen 64, and I remember rifling through that website. Oh, I remember this game. I remember that game. I remember Dinosaur Planets, the Kirby game on the GameCube that was meant to come out. It was mostly GameCube stuff I was interested in because I felt like there was quite a lot for that platform that were cancelled. But I can remember discovering that website and falling in love with it and wanting to contribute because the site had seen a bit of a downturn in terms of posts because the owner just got busy with life, and that's what happens as you get older. So I contributed to them on and off for many years, and I decided one day that I would turn the articles I was writing into videos, and that was where the Unseen 64 video series came from. And that is on my own personal channel on YouTube. And eventually, I think I started it in like mid 2015, and several months later we'd done a number of big stories. I'd done stuff on like the not cancelled, but the pitched Kid Icarus game for the Wii, Factor 5 was trying to do, and stuff like that. Project Hammer, some pretty big stuff if you're into Nintendo history.
Oh yeah.
And so Did You Know Gaming, the owner of that, was interested in what I was doing and making videos and some of my stuff already, putting some of my little facts that I'd uncovered into their videos. And so I think what happened was they'd posted a video on something. I think it was to do with Sonic Adventure 2. And I just sort of snarkily, as you do on Twitter, corrected a mistake they'd made in their video. I was like, well, actually, did you know that this fact you've got in your video about the submarine in Sonic Adventure 2 is actually wrong? Because I've spoken to the producer of the game. And so I think my, assholery was looked upon fondly by the owner of Did You Know Gaming, Shane Gale. I don't know, he thought that was cool that I knew that, and he was like, hey, why don't you just come make videos for me? And he made me a deal I couldn't refuse. To be honest, it wasn't really a deal. I mean, he just said, just come make videos for me and I'll give you all the revenue from them, but put me on a much bigger platform. Right. And certainly at the time, Did You Know Gaming was massive. It still is very big, but at the time that was before the adpocalypse, and things changed quite a lot. We still do well in terms of revenue, but the views have gone down over the years. But this was like late 2015. They asked me to join, and so I started doing videos for them. And by that point, I'd gone to some pretty big subjects like the cancelled Avengers game, a lot of superhero games, stuff like that. And I've been making videos of Did You Know Gaming ever since. And eventually we did stop the Unseen 64 series because I'm not sure what I should say here. It wasn't my decision. It was the owner of the website. Gotcha. Basically, I don't think he likes me very much. And
he's not here. That's okay.
Yeah, I don't want to start beef, but I'll just say I love the guy, but I don't think it was reciprocated. I'm trying to be very diplomatic here.
No, that's fine.
But I feel like that I feel like to some degree they resented how popular the videos were compared to the website, and it was sort of what the name Unseen 64 was becoming known for. That was what I took away from what happened. And so one day they just told me kind of out of the blue, like, you're not going to make any more videos.
Wow.
Like, call it something else. And I don't know why they decided to do that, because it wasn't like I had done anything bad. Yeah. It wasn't. I've never really gone into this on a public forum like this before.
No, that's fine.
I tried to be very amicable about it and just be like, okay. It was kind of annoying because I was actually in the middle of making a video. Right. And it was, I swear, like half edited. I'd written the script and it was half edited and everything, and they just sort of dropped it on me. you're not going to make any more Unseen 64 videos. I'm taking back the website. And so, yeah, we had a breakup, which I think I handled it as best as I could. And I immediately got to work with some digital artists to mock up, like, what could we do instead? And so we came up with Game History Secrets, which is, you know, it's like the I don't know, it's sort of like the ukulele to their Banjo Kazooie or something, but hopefully a bit better.
Right.
That was just what came to mind off the top of my head.
No, I get it.
Yeah, it was sort of my spiritual successor to basically just continuing everything that I was doing with Unseen 64, but it opened the door a lot wider. I feel like it liberated me to do a lot more crazy things, and obviously I wasn't restricted to everything Unseen 64 just wanted me to do at that point. And I feel like since then I've grown a lot in terms of a writer. I've done some of my best work since doing that series. We found the Work Boy. I don't know if people have heard of that, but it's like an unreleased Nintendo peripheral. And last month we showed off another unreleased Nintendo peripheral that nobody had ever seen before, called the Page Boy. And so, look it up. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I've done some of my biggest stories, my best work under that series, and that's what I've been doing since, is Game History Secrets on YouTube, on Did You Know Gaming. And I see in the chat someone said AVGN talked about the Work Boy, and you were completely right. And that was in part what inspired me to do the video, because nobody had found the Work Boy before, like found an actual physical peripheral.
Lots of these Game Boy accessories are rare. Some of the ones that I couldn't get my hands on are the Game Boy FM radio, the Work Boy, where you can plug in a keyboard and turn the Game Boy into a personal computer, just in case you didn't like using a monitor.
I encourage, people watching, if you're interested in that, look it up.
Yeah, for
sure. We found the Work Boy. We found a prototype. We got it working, and it's there in that video. And I do mention the AVGN because I feel like him talking about it, even just that, elevated its notoriety. That's why people know it, is because of the AVGN. But that's more or less my story. I think is I uncover cancel games and stuff like that for Did You Know Gaming now.
So I guess this kind of leads really well into my next question. What is your process like? What is the investigative process like when you're looking for these, games that were canceled, or these games that were kind of close to coming out and never came out, or, peripherals that just never made their appearance? Like, how do you even begin to go about researching or finding that information?
Well, it's different for every game. It depends on, was it publicly announced? Because if it was, that will make it a bit easier.
Okay.
If it were, say, Fable Legends is one. One thing to take into consideration is like the size of the team. And another thing to consider is, has this team or company made a game before? Because if they have and it got published, then we have a very good asset that we can take advantage of as people on the outside, and that is the game credits. Because we have a public list. If they've, let's say, I want to do a video on Lionhead, who made Fable, then I can look up what was the previous game they made that got published, and I can look up the list of game credits from that game, right? And that will tell us a pretty comprehensive list of everyone who worked at the studio. So now I can go and I can cross-reference that with stuff like LinkedIn.
I see. Okay.
And I can be like, hey, you want to talk some Fable with, I can go through the list. I don't do that all the time because it doesn't normally take that long. Another thing I can do is just search LinkedIn or other resume websites, because that is the thing. Game developers will put references to cancel games on their resumes and portfolios, and that is how I can find that by Googling or searching on various websites. So that is one thing that I do. Game credits, LinkedIn, that is often how the ball gets rolling, but it gets harder if, say, the game was never announced. If I wanted to find, say, information on the Crash Wumper League game, the Crash Bandicoot game, which was rumored like a year or so ago, and its status is currently unknown, that's in dispute. But because that has never been officially announced, I can't go onto LinkedIn and type in Wumper League. There will be references to it in people's resumes, but I've got to think, what can they put on there which is vague enough that they can put on their resume? So I would search something like unannounced project, Toys for Bob, or something like that, and that just gives you an idea. You got to think about like what vague language would Activision permit them to use on their resume without saying they worked on that project, because that is the thing in games. Everyone signs NDAs and so many contracts to stop them from talking out. But if you go in privately, then that kind of allows you to wedge the door open a bit.
Right.
And that makes people more comfortable, because then they think, oh, other people are talking. Then they feel more comfortable with it is technically breaking NDA, but it's not really that big of a deal. They know me. Oftentimes, they know Did You Know Gaming. One of the pluses with working with Did You Know Gaming is people see that on my LinkedIn or when they search my name, and they're like, oh, I've watched that before. I know these guys. I can probably trust this guy.
That helps.
And that actually has been like an unexpected asset for me. Another thing that helps is that I'm a public figure, and I'm on Twitter and YouTube and what have you. And occasionally I will just have something thrown my way. Like someone will be like, oh, I like your videos. Here is, I worked at Activision on this project, or Ubisoft on this project. And that, I would say, it's probably about 50-50 either way. When I first started out, obviously, it was just me just doing my own research and chasing my own leads and whatever. But now, I am fortunate enough to know quite a few people in the industry, and occasionally someone will be like, I've just had this project cancelled at the studio. I know that you're the guy to come to about that, so let me tell you about this game. So yeah, I'm very fortunate on that front. Yeah.
Now, when you if a game's canceled, are they still technically under an NDA to not talk about that game?
Depend on the terms of the NDA, but generally, I would say 99% of the time in the major kind of mainstream games industry, yes, you would not be allowed to talk about that, because publishers, for one reason or another, are very secretive. They may want to reuse those ideas at some point in the future, or go back to that project, or recycle it in some way or another, such as Nintendo. Like Nintendo has a history of doing that, bringing stuff back from older Zeldas that didn't make it in, and then re-implementing them 10, 20 years later. That really does happen with Zelda and Mario, and that happens across the industry. So that is one reason they'd want to protect those secrets. Another is PR, because you don't want people, say, with Scalebound, like if people knew more about Scalebound and the circumstances of that development and some of the things that went on at Platinum Games, particularly in the year 2016, people would be like, oh, I may think differently about these companies now that I've learned those things. A lot of game publishers are sort of inclined to cover those secrets up for PR reasons. And so, yeah, it's intellectual property and covering up them secrets. They don't want the bad press and stuff like that, because if they start to talk about cancelled stuff, like who knows what else leaks out as well, maybe unreleased stuff that they're still working on, and or people will find out about if there's something bad that's happened at the studio, such as you look at the stuff with Activision Blizzard. And a good example is, in my case, I investigated Project Hammer, which was this unreleased Nintendo Wii game. Do you remember that at all?
I do. That when I first saw the previews of I want to try this game, when the Wii, that was when Red Steel was still not the actual gameplay, but just a concept video. And my mind at the time was oh, these games look awesome. I want to play Project Hammer and I want to play this. So I do remember that, and I was always I always wondered, like, what happened to it? You know, where did it go?
The title was a beat-em-up being made for the Wii, which, after being shown publicly at only one event in 2006, mysteriously vanished from release schedules. Rumours that it had been put on indefinite hold followed, but the true fate of Project Hammer remained uncertain. Yeah, I've done a video on it, and this illustrates why game publishers are sort of inclined to cover this stuff up, because sometimes you pull a thread and you unravel a whole string of misconduct and all kinds of bad allegations. In the case of that game, when I researched that, I just initially was looking to find out what happened to the game because I was interested in it as well. But as I started to dig deeper, I learned that there's like allegations of nationalism against the studio's heads.
Yikes! Yeah.
And all kinds of weird stuff. And it turned out, from what I remember, over half of the studio left during the course of that game's development to illustrate just how bad that must have been. The working conditions were terrible by all accounts. And so that is an example of why, say, Nintendo might be inclined to cover up Project Hammer because it went terribly. It's like one of the biggest wastes of money that I can think of in Nintendo history.
Wow.
They actually changed their internal policies at the time towards making CGI cutscenes after it, because in that generation, Nintendo worked with animation studios a lot to do like CGI cutscenes for stuff like Super Mario Strikers and Metroid Prime Hunters. They all have these luscious CGI cutscenes. Now, the problem with those was, at least in the case of Project Hammer, the story and the cutscenes and everything, those are all scripted out and written for this animation studio to do separately before they'd even figured out what the game was really going to be. They were still developing it, and it was a mess. And so this studio, this animation house, made all these cutscenes, and they cost, I think, over $1 million or something like that to make these cutscenes.
Oh, wow.
Probably more than that. I'm not exactly sure of the number, but I think from what I remember, it was at least $1 million. And so they never got any return on that because the game got cancelled. And so they just spent all this money on these lush CGI cutscenes. And at the end of the day, nobody sees them. You know, a lot went wrong on that project, and that is why they have these NDAs everywhere to cover up misconduct and just dumb things that happen like that.
Is there a lot of cases where a lot of games get canceled that we just don't hear about? Is that a common thing? Because I was always under the assumption, I could be wrong, it's like, why would you cancel a game if you put so much time and effort and money into it? Especially now for like AAA studios, like games are expensive, so like why would you just cancel everything?
It's a bit difficult to define this because obviously I'm not omnipresent or anything, but I would say what I would regard as a cancelled game is something that enters, that's greenlit, and it enters at least pre-production, right? So I wouldn't count a pitch as a cancelled game, you know? Someone just pitching an idea to a publisher and they decide whether or not they want to do it or not. But I would say if you wanted to count those as cancelled games, which I personally do not, I would say there's more of those pitches and lost ideas, way more than games that are released, because you know there's so many of those get shot down every year, possibly every week. You know, in the games industry, they go through so many ideas before they land on, here is a financially viable project that we want to invest in,
right? Because
it's a money thing at the end of the day. In terms of cancel games, of what I would define as a cancel game, in terms of things that enter pre-production, there are many, countless examples. I could not begin to fathom how many there must be.
Wow.
Hundreds, if not thousands, that we don't see, that are never announced at E3 or what have you. Because that's what happens. Things go wrong more often than not. The games industry is incredibly volatile to work in, and games are cancelled for so many different reasons. publishers go out of business. Sometimes I actually think, when people hear games get cancelled, a lot of the time the reaction is, oh, well, maybe it was just no good.
Yeah.
But most of the time that is not true at all. Or that might be a small factor, but in general, it's some financial reason. Or it's some other studio has come along with a similar idea and we're not going to compete with that. It's usually a financial reason that a game would get shut down, in my experience. The game publisher goes out of business, or maybe the previous game didn't make enough money and the game publisher wants to put them on something else, so the project they've got in pre-production, maybe the sequel, gets cancelled or something like that. There are countless, innumerable examples of what you're talking about, of games that are in early pre-production and even production that get cancelled. And some games, I could tell you right now, there is I won't say what it is.
Yeah,
there
sure.
There is at least one Nintendo Switch game I know of.
Okay.
That's a known IP.
Okay.
That is an exclusive Nintendo Switch game. It's finished and it's never going to be released.
Oh man.
It's completely
man.
done.
Yeah.
And that's that game I'm talking about. It's never been announced. It's never been announced at all. And if I was to say what it was, people would be like, I think, well, it's not like a gigantic franchise, but it's a known franchise, and people would be like, what, really? There's that game's
man.
just sitting around.
Oh, the possibilities! I'm going nuts now. But I understand at the same time.
But that's it's just to give you an example. It's a third-party thing. It's not a Nintendo thing. Just to be clear, games get cancelled at all stages and often do not get ever announced.
That's I mean, it makes perfect sense, but you just blew my little mind saying all this, because it just seems like what happens, I mean, you might not know this, but what do you tell your team? It's like, hey, that game you worked on for the last year, it's not coming out now, and we just basically threw all this money away. Or is that just a nature of the beast thing that's accepted, or is that looked at as a management failure, or just looked at it as we didn't pitch it well enough, or if only we pitched it better or changed this, they would have accepted it? Because, or is it just it just happens,
To some degree, I think most people realize that this is just a thing that happens in the games industry, particularly when more and more money gets involved and you get into AAA levels, because at that point, to give you a very weird analogy, it's sort of like building a tower out of cards, right?
Right.
The higher you get, the more likely it is to fall over in terms of money spent. There's always disappointment. In my experience, talking to the developers, developers are not cold, unfeeling people. They put their hearts and souls into this stuff a lot of the time. Sometimes to some people, if they're not so fond of the project, it is just kind of a job. But for most people, I would say, almost all, there is always some amount of emotional investment. People don't get to enjoy the thing that you've made.
Right.
And you don't get to show people, if that game gets cancelled, particularly if it wasn't announced, you don't get to be like, oh, here's the thing I've been working on, it's cancelled now. Because they'll sue you, because you're probably under an NDA or something like that.
Right.
The publishers don't want you to do that. So, I think it does weigh on the developers. There is some emotional toll. But at the same time, there is some level of expectation for that.
If I sound dumbstruck, I'm extremely dumbstruck right now. I'm learning so much here. So, when people come to you or you approach them, is it sort of a I can't tell you who I really am, but I can tell you where I worked at and this is what I worked on? Or are they very open or my name's so-and-so and, I used to work here. I used to work at Lionhead, or I used to work at, Konami, and this is what we worked on?
Very few people ever contact me fully anonymously and don't want to share stuff. I don't trust anyone who does that.
That's fair.
If anyone does do that, I'm inclined to believe that this is some, troll who doesn't really know how this stuff works.
Right.
Most people most people who contact me and want to share information have like a verifiable public online presence, and that I can cross-reference and be like, okay, you're this guy from this studio or whatever.
Gotcha.
So I would never, if someone is like, I can't tell you my name, but I work for Platinum Games and here's the next game.
Right.
I wouldn't be like, right, I'm gonna post that on Twitter right now or something.
I trust this person with my life, right?
Yeah. It could just be anyone, and so I generally make sure. Well, I always make sure that there is some truth to what they're saying. You know, I would corroborate with other sources, and but generally it is named developers. Very, very few people have I contacted by anonymously, and that has made it into any work that I've done. I can't, off the top of my head, think of a single example of that ever happening, where someone contacted me fully anonymously, because I will just be like, look, I'm going to level with you. I'm not going to publish anything on this if you won't tell me who you are.
Right.
So you got to tell me who you are, and trust me, I've never outed anyone or got anyone into trouble. I have a reputation by this point, and I think people know that I'm not just going to be like, this is the person who told me about the Crash game or something, right? People trust me, so I if I am to trust what they are saying, then I want them to trust me as well. It's got to be like a two-way thing. Otherwise, using anonymous sources, I think people just assume that is something that happens, that people just get anonymous notes but that's not what happens. Like, how would you be able to tell that that's real?
Well,
you could actually look into it.
That's what that again, like, it's like we've rehearsed this. We didn't, by the way, but like we're flowing so well into the next set of questions. That's what I always wondered lately about, leaks or like supposed leakers, or a E3 list got dumped on 4chan, or I have a secret source within Nintendo who says Mario Kart 9 is like coming out or something like that. I'm like, how can you trust this? But then published like IGN and not to diss anybody, but like IGN, GameSpot, they run with it and they're just like, oh, we heard this. I'm like, but you don't even know it's true. Like they didn't verify a source, they didn't do anything. So when a lot of people leak things today, like out of all the leaks that you see or people you see leaking things, like are they coming from similar to you? Are they coming from like, I trust my sources, I'm really into this? Or is it just like, I sort of heard somebody say on the bus that, Metroid Prime 4 is like, coming out, next year on Unreal 5 or something ridiculous like that?
Most people, I would like to think, are sincere in what they say. And maybe that is being generous, but I think a lot of people are just doing their best. I do think there are some people who do legitimate leaks and stuff like that. People like Nate Drake. I think he's pretty reliable. He seems to know what he's doing. And Emily Rogers.
Oh yeah.
People criticize all these people or whatever, but from what I know from interacting with them, and they're very nice people, and they know what they're doing, and they know who to trust for the most part, and kudos to them. There are so many people who just sort of pretend to do this, who LARP as like researchers on Twitter and stuff like that, who aren't really doing anything. Like, there are people, there are people who just say absolute nonsense, and it is a combination of guesswork based upon pre-established patterns, like this is how long ago a Kirby game came out, or this is how this is the usual schedule for development of Fire Emblem or Mario or whatever, and they combine that with what reputable people are already saying. They basically will copy that and maybe add one or two little details to substantiate it that really don't really mean anything. And so there are a lot of pretenders out there, and I'm sure the people listening know who I'm talking to. The people who like go on Twitter and say, oh, the games media has Pokemon Legends, and then someone jumps in the comments and is like, no, we don't have that, and then they block that person.
That's what you know, right?
Yeah, like, I'm not a leaker. Like let's establish that. Like I'm more into like cancelled stuff and everything. So I'm not really very entrenched in this world. But there are people who do legit work, and I do my own game research into cancelled stuff for the most part. And it's not hard to do. Literally all you've got to do is look up a game developer and talk to them. Send them some questions. Most game developers are really open and nice and will talk to you about whatever.
Okay.
But instead, people just pretend to do that. They could legitimately do this if they wanted to, but they cynically just copy from other people. For what? Like, what do they get out of it? Like a bit of internet clouds? But for the most part, if you're just guessing, you're not going to get things right. And people are going to eventually be like, well, you're just obviously faking. And I think people are very good at spotting the fake ones. And there's like several on Twitter who just recurrently pop up and say a thing, and it gets popped up. It gets picked up by, you know, like comicbook.com or whatever websites.
Yeah, they run with it,
Yeah, they run with it because they're not really entrenched in the world of who's a real leaker and whatever, and because they have followings that they've amassed from people who don't know better. You know, it just perpetuates this cycle, and so that's a shame. Like, that's one thing that we've got to change is, you know, the games press has got to stop giving these people attention. There are legit people who do this, and there are fakers, and the fakers could become legit anytime they wanted to if they wanted to put any real effort into it. Like that is what is so crazy. There's no barrier to entry. You know what I mean? Like, I was not given a special badge to begin doing this. I just decided, like, when I was 15 or something, to start writing to game developers, and it's easy. And yeah, I mean, I'm not doing anything special. I've learned a lot, but at the end of the day, anyone can do this.
Right. So, you know, you mentioned that on there, and have you ever had somebody come to you that you were surprised by, like, who they were? I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, have you ever had somebody come to you and tell you, like, we were working on this, you're like, oh my god, you're the developer of this game, or, you know, you're a Todd Howard level person who reveals this stuff, or is it usually somebody else from, like, a different team?
For the most part, it's people on the ground floor. You know what I mean? If they want to leak something, it's because actually, there is someone I can think of, a director of a Nintendo game, actually leaked a game to me once.
Oh wow!
But I won't say what that is. But there was a game. Obviously, I can't say what that is. But there was one game that I did have the exclusive story on a while ago. It was going back years, but I remember the director of that game came and told me, like, oh, this is what we're doing. Do you want to write about it before we announce it? And I was like, oh, wow. Dude, sure. And so it very, very occasionally does happen. But that is like a rare, that's an exception to the rule. For the most part, it is people on the ground floor who are often disgruntled, who want to tell me about the working conditions and things that are going wrong at a studio as well. Like some leaks, not usually to me, but some leaks are carried out maliciously because of the way the staff are treated. You know, because why would you, if you really think about it, why would you betray your co-workers and break the vow of silence that you've agreed to together?
Right.
Like if you were happy with the project, surely you would want the company itself to announce it. And so a lot of the time there is something in the developers' hearts that they're not happy with that might lead them to doing that. That's not always the case. Sometimes game developers just buddy up to people like myself and game journalists or whatever. And so there's like a friendly relationship. And if someone asks, they might tell. Or they might just be really excited and might want to preempt the announcement date or something. They might want to just be like, hey, can I tell you about this game I'm working on? And because there's a lot of overlap between the people who make the games and the people who write about them. A lot of the time people go from writing in games to working on them. And so then those people have contacts in the games media, and then they go and they talk to their old game journal buddies, and they're like, hey, can I tell you about this game? So that's an example of like how this type of thing might happen.
Gotcha.
I think I've kind of forgotten the original question, but there's a symbiotic relationship.
Gotcha. I basically, like, what I meant is like Todd Howard's not dropping into your inbox. We're like, hey, I got this info on this game called Starfield. Nobody at that level dropping in, right?
Well, yeah, I do talk to people on that level.
Okay.
But they don't want to. Most of the time, they don't want to. It might give me a hint, but
Gotcha.
I would say that's only real in terms of a full. I'm gonna leak this whole project. That's probably only happened once or twice.
Okay.
From a high up developer. For the most part, it's people on the ground floor. But I do talk to people, who do big things. I've spoken to Julian Egbrecht. Who, yeah.
Factor 5
was
right?
Yeah, exactly. Factor 5. I've spoken to him many times. He has given me some like exclusive footage from an unreleased game that's on my YouTube channel. And now he is one of the people at Epic Games, I think, heading up like streaming tech on Fortnite, I think, and other things. I've spoken to Warren Spector.
Oh man,
I've spoken to Kiichi Yano, who was the head of Innis, which made Elite Beat Agents and games like that, and
Nice.
Gitaru Man. There are many game studio heads that I've communicated with in one way or another. But in general, in my line of work, it's talking to people on the ground floor. Because that's really where you get the unfiltered truth, People who run the game studios might be more inclined to be, want to save their reputation and not want to shoulder the blame for things going wrong or whatever. So people on the ground floor who maybe don't work there or whatever are less inclined to have an agenda to sugarcoat what really happened.
Gotcha. So, you've had this really, really long, extensive history, working with, developers, canceled projects, games that never released. What was the one game that just, like, really shocked you? That you would just either A, surprised that this game even existed, and you could be vague about it if you want to, or B, you were just surprised that it just got canceled because it seemed like a no-brainer to, come out?
In answer to both of those, it's the same game, actually. And it's never been announced, but there is a game that was related to, I would say, two of the biggest gaming icons ever, I would say. It was sort of like a crossover.
Okay.
And that's not known about publicly, and I can't say what it is because I want to one day do a video. I have the stuff right. We'll talk about it one day. I don't think this was ever in production, but it was something that was planned not that long ago, actually.
Okay.
Pretty recently. It's not happening anymore, as far as I know.
Okay.
And it's I hate not be able to talk about it.
No, I know.
But if I say what it is, people would be like, "What?"
Really?
But to give you an idea, it's like mascot character type things. And you'll find out about that eventually.
Okay.
I'm sure.
Okay, I'm gonna say no more. Don't want you to get in trouble, but it's definitely making imaginations run wild now, that's for sure. Was there ever a game that you uncovered that you personally were disappointed never came out because you felt that this could have been this is a game that I would have wanted to play, this is a game that in theory I would have loved? Has there ever been a game or games that you've discovered that you just you're like, oh man, I really wish that worked out, I really wish that came through?
In 2010, publisher THQ had acquired the rights to produce a large-scale video game based around the Avengers property. It was set to launch within the same year as the movie of the same name on multiple platforms.
What comes to mind for me is the Avengers game that THQ was making in about 2010. And so it was like a first-person co-op game,
Right.
and it was in I don't know, like maybe half done, I would say, something like that. But it had a really cool idea for a story. It was based around like the Secret Invasion storyline from the comics.
With the Skrulls, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
With the Skrulls and the Super Skrulls. And it got pretty far, you know. This was going to be like the first ever like AAA Avengers game. And it, THQ went out of business and it sort of fell apart as a result of that. I would have loved to have seen that. I think that looked genuinely fun. I think it had a lot of really cool ideas with like the co-op aspect to it and the story and the world. I think it looked like the gameplay just looked like a lot of fun. Obviously, it was not nearly finished, but that looked so good. That looked, to me, if that had come out, that would have absolutely been better than the Avengers game we eventually did get.
Oh, for sure, right.
From Square. So that comes to mind. There was a cool like open world game based around the Flash that I thought also looked really cool. Where you'd race around the city and fight crime and that type of thing. There's definitely more. Definitely some of the Factor 5 ones. They were developing a game sort of like Microsoft Flight Simulator, but it's like I would say it's like a cross between Microsoft Flight Simulator and Pilot Wings.
Oh, nice.
Where you would fly around the entire world as one like seamless open world, doing Pilot Wings sort of missions, jumping through hoops and shooting things and what have you, and you'd have a wide variety of vehicles. It was called We Fly, and that game got pretty far along, and I have tried my best to negotiate the release of like a prototype of this. That one does stick out to me. I think if there was one of these on this list, then it would be Factor 5's We Fly. Look it up. It looks like a really cool game. Like they had, I don't know if you remember, but the Wii had the forecast channel.
Yeah, I remember that.
So this game was gonna be able to pull weather data from that channel and implement it into the game, so you would fly around this world in real time and the weather would be true to how it is in the real world.
Oh my god, wow.
So it's just crazy like how big that was going to be and how advanced it seemed. They were even trying to make like a 3D VR accessory for this game. So you've got the Wii Weather Channel. Look it up. It's a crazy experiment, and it got pretty far. Like there's a demo of it, there's a trailer, there's gameplay, but we'll probably never see it because I can't get the developers to sign off on releasing it. I got the publishers to agree, but I don't think Julian Eggbrecht wants to do it. So
I got
balls in your court, Julian. Release We Fly.
If you're watching, do the right thing, Julian, please. So that's really interesting because it seems like Nintendo did a lot of like, and to an extent they still kind of do, like a lot of experimental stuff. Like a lot of utilizing these features that wouldn't really immediately like come to mind, compared to, I guess Microsoft or Sony. Were there any games for the Xbox or, the PlayStation that you felt were like really experimental and a little bit out there that got canceled?
Certainly Scalebound comes to mind on the Xbox as a one that I thought looked really interesting, and we really never got to see what that game was truly about. What it was actually about, the world was sort of akin to Star Wars and Avatar and Lord of the Rings. Like it was really ambitious and cool, and we never really got to see the RPG stuff and how the progression in the game would work and the kind of overarching story. I think the impression people got of it was not true to what the game actually would have been, which was really experimental and cool. And there is another one that comes to mind, which again is a game which I don't think was officially given a name or a title or was properly announced, which was going to be an Xbox One exclusive that, believe it or not, did use Kinect and was sort of going to be a third-person action game for the Xbox One. And so I don't think Kinect was mandatory with it. I can't remember, but that game I want to talk about someday. I've been begging the people who worked on it to tell me more about it for years. That game sounded really cool, but I won't say more about it.
Right.
But there was this one game that I'm thinking of that looked great. In terms of Sony, I'm not an expert on Sony cancelled stuff. I have covered some before, but honestly, the stuff that Sony has cancelled, for the most part, there's nothing there that I can think of that jumps out to me. I suppose Factor 5, yes, I'm saying this again. Factor 5 did do some interesting stuff on the PS3 that Sony cancelled. They were doing a kind of a war game with animals that was
I heard about
really
that.
Violent. Yeah. So there's, I think it's called Animal Wars. They were going to do a reboot of Turrican in 3D on the PS3, which I think they were trying to get Sony to fund. That was like a crazy looking third-person shooter that Sony was sort of initially signed on possibly to do something with. So that's an example. That game from the Getaway developers
8 days
on the
right?
PS3. Yeah. You know what you know what you're talking about there. That one looked cool. That one looked cool. There's Agent, the Rockstar
the Rockstar
game,
one. I remember.
Called.
Yeah. We saw we saw like the logo and like that was it. And every E3, I remember everybody's like, guys, this is the year Agent's gonna get shown and nothing. So I have a question to ask, and this is me being completely self-indulgent on my own channel on here.
Go for it.
And if you're not allowed to say too much, that's fine. Or if you don't know, you don't know. Silent Hills. Have you heard anything behind like the cancellation of it? Is there? Do you know if there's any chance of anything like that getting resurrected again under Konami and old Kojima Productions, or is that just stop thinking about it because it's never gonna happen?
Well, I've heard stuff about Silent Hills, like the original development of it over the years, and MGS5 and stuff like that. Just like occasionally heard little whispers here and there. Not much that's like substantial that I've really like dug into, because the big problem here is that I don't speak Japanese. Gotcha. So there's a big language barrier. Most of the people who would have worked on it are Japanese, I'd imagine, or that's like their primary language. I guess there might have been some developers who would have worked at the publishers that would know about it that I could contact. But to me, it seems like it might not be worth my time. I'm more of like a Western-facing person when in terms of researching these things. And I would love to be like, hey, here's the deal with Silent Hills or whatever. In terms of resurrection, I've not heard anything substantial about that either. Like so far, I've not seen anything that has convinced me that is something that's going to happen.
Gotcha.
I think obviously if Konami wanted to do it, then it would happen. But Konami is sort of in a weird place right now, where they seem to be more interested in fucking Castlevania NFTs than doing stuff like that. You know, you know, pachinko machines. They're just in a very strange place business-wise, where they don't know what the fans want, and they are just catering to the domestic market in Japan. Like that's a lot of. I see the chat flipping out at the mention of NFTs. That's funny. But it's true, man. Look it up. Like instead of making a new Castlevania game, they are doing Castlevania NFTs. So they're a very out of touch company. They don't know what their traditional base around the world wants, and they don't care. They don't care because another thing you've got to understand is that like Konami is run by like ancient old men who are like kind of out of touch with this stuff at this point. Like you look at the people who run Capcom and Konami and Square, it's like a dynasty, you know?
Yeah.
It's all like it's kept like Nintendo used to be the same. It's kept in like a family. It's like all nepotism that runs these companies. I think Konami's very out of touch. And if they weren't, then they would do it. But I think also a thing that you've got to understand is culturally, there's a lot of pride there. There's a lot of pride at these Japanese companies, and they obviously have a strong sense of honor as well. Like that is a big cultural thing in Japan.
Right.
And we don't know the extent of the bad blood between, say, Kojima and Konami, but we are led to believe it is extensive. And normally when there are these breaks in Japanese game development, the wounds don't often heal. There are a lot of big egos in games. And in Japan, I feel like people hold grudges longer. Maybe I am stereotyping there, but just from what I hear, these people have a lot of pride, and they don't want to bend the knee to Kojima or whoever and be like, please, we're nothing without Silent Hills. Like it just so rarely happens that you get you get a capitulation like that. I just don't. I don't see it happening. I could be wrong, but this is you're honestly just asking like, what is my sense of it, and that is I don't know. If I had to guess, that would be my answer. Is probably not anytime soon.
You saying we're nothing without you, that's what my dreams look like, and then I wake up and I'm just like, oh man, we get NFTs instead. So I guess another question that just sort of popped up, when you see achievements leak, or like you see like, oh, there's a storefront for X game, is that to you a reliable indicator that the game is coming? And the example I could think of is like beginning of the new year, they said, oh, GoldenEye, all the achievements leaked and all these screenshots leaked. Or, they said, oh, Nintendo, trademarked this, they trademarked this name, like Kid Icarus or Earthbound or something like that. How reliable are those indicators? Or, Amazon puts a placement, or, the Korean rating board rated this game. How reliable is that usually that a game is coming? Or is that just sort of a maintenance thing that they do?
In terms of trademarks, that is an indication that they want to, for the most part, renew a property. If it's a patent, then they're working on something, but it's not a guarantee that it'll see the light of day. It could just be, again, they're doing sort of housekeeping, and they have an idea and they want to keep it to themselves.
Right.
But something clearly has been worked on there, and a lot of the time, those kind of ideas don't see the light of day. In terms of placeholders on Amazon, I think that's generally a good sign, but obviously you have at the same time plenty of just sort of procedural errors where I think Amazon is quite reliable for stuff like that, but when you go to sort of lesser known, like, Spanish retail websites that people point to when a box art for whatever pops up on there, like that might not be so reliable because we don't really know how that got on there. Placeholders, that's less reliable because then that could just be a mistake at the company, the retailer or Amazon or what have you. In terms of the achievements thing with GoldenEye, that is interesting. But I don't really know the circumstances of how that got online. Like, they made the GoldenEye port years ago and finished it, did they not? Because could that not just mean that the achievements were like in the system somewhere and they've leaked out? Now I'm a believer. I think it will come out sooner or later. There's no way you can keep that in the vault forever. It's already leaked online.
Yeah.
What you think Microsoft isn't gonna want to try and get some money for that? The reason it didn't come out was because the rights were so complicated back then. They didn't have a relationship with Nintendo. But now there are fewer fingers in the pie. Activision, I don't think, owns the rights to Bond anymore, so that makes it easier to get out.
Yeah.
Nintendo and Microsoft are on great terms. They're in bed together practically. So now is the time to pull the trigger on that. And I think sooner or later, I believe in Phil Spencer and the higher-ups at Nintendo now. They've come a long way. There's been a lot of progress on their relationship with Banjo.
Oh, yeah.
Like in Smash, Banjo-Kazooie, today or tomorrow, I'm not sure, is on the
Besides
Nintendo.
the Switch? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what is going to happen, and this is a guess, is they will in some form release the work that they've done at Rare to do this. Like, that is my guess, you know?
I guess in regards to recent news with the whole Activision Microsoft acquisition, and Twitter is going to be Twitter the way they are. I've seen a lot of people talking like, oh my god, like these developers, they're free from the COD mines. They don't have to work on Call of Duty anymore, and Phil's gonna like give them all the room, and all these old Activision IPs are gonna come back. We're gonna get we're gonna get like just pie in the sky, like your delusions of grandeur. Like, we're gonna get like a Pitfall game. We're gonna get like Soldier of Fortune back. Do you really see that as a reality, or do you think Activision, once they're under Microsoft, is just going to stay status quo with what works?
Well, I think a lot of that depends upon the leadership. And if we believe the reports, which I do, and this is what I said immediately after learning about the news, I think like Bobby Kotick is toast, you know what I mean? Like,
he's
that
out
guy,
of there.
his days are numbered. And so it'll be a new age. Bobby Kotick has done a lot of bad things at Ubisoft. Ubisoft, at Activision. That's a bit of a Freudian slip as well, because Ubisoft isn't so good either.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, he has done a lot of things at that company that I don't agree with, that have diminished franchises, annualization of franchises that do not suit that model, like Skylanders and Guitar Hero, just driving them into the ground, right? And so even the things that he has found success with, he has found ways to absolutely harpoon by doing just dipshit things like that. So I think it will be a new day, and we will be in uncharted waters. So it's difficult for me to say, but I think from what we've seen so far, the studios that Xbox has assumed control over have largely had positive relationships, and we've seen good games come out and creativity flourish. Like, we are in my opinion, the golden age for Xbox. Like, you look at Game Pass, you look at the things that Xbox is helping facilitate. We've just had the best Halo game in a long time.
Oh yeah.
We've just Forza Horizon 5, Psychonauts, and the Gunk. Like, there are many interesting games that are coming out that are flourishing under Xbox. So I am to believe that things will inevitably improve, because how could they get worse, right? Like, look at Activision's portfolio right now.
Right.
It's almost all Call of Duty.
All COD, all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, like after 2020, they pretty much like shut down a bunch of like Vicarious Visions is now a part of Blizzard. Toys for Bob is on Call of Duty.
Raven,
and
they're
yeah. And I think it's Raven that is kind of getting gutted right now as well. From what I remember, there was another studio in the news. I can't remember what it was called. That was just getting like loads of people were leaving, and we're getting laid off and stuff. So it's a right state, and I think until the acquisition goes through, things will remain the same. And also, you've got to remember, there are contracts that are in place that won't expire for years after the I think PlayStation has an agreement for Call of Duty, so they'll continue to get those games, and they'll continue to get their marketing deals with those. So there's a lot of things that will continue as status quo after the acquisition, even if Bobby Kotick goes, because they are already in place. But I think once he goes, that will liberate. It obviously depends on who will replace him. Hopefully it's not a lackey of his. Hopefully Xbox picks someone who's not an associate of Jeffrey Epstein this time. That would be a plus.
Right.
Hopefully someone who hasn't threatened to kill their assistant. That would be a start. So I think it depends who they pick and who makes up the higher ups there. And as far as I'm concerned, I hope they do a big refresh and kick out the people who've helped facilitate the harm that has gone on at Activision Blizzard, covering up the misconduct and the things that have led to all the various allegations out there. So I think it is a step in the right direction, and I think pretty long term, it's going to be a while, we'll see some difference. We'll see some positive changes. I think, to me, it's just as exciting to think about the IPs being available to other Xbox studios, like Double Fine can take a crack at some Crash Bandicoot if they wanted to.
Oh man,
that's like completely out there, but you know what I mean. Like the possibilities are endless. Like Rare could have a go at Spyro. I don't know, but they could get finally a brand new, fully original Tony Hawk that's not complete garbage, right? They I'm sure like you look at how many studios they own now, someone must be able to do that. They've also got like Radical Entertainment and the games they worked on. I wonder if there's a possibility of bringing back the Simpsons Hit and Run, which they worked on many years ago. I don't know, but there's many possibilities, and to me, I think the biggest potential from the perspective of me as a gamer is the IPs they now own. And so many people at Microsoft will be like, oh, I'd like to work on this IP, or like Microsoft is already talking publicly about bringing back older properties and stuff. So there's a lot of potential there. But to answer your question, I think it'll be a long time before we see a big change for us as gamers. But I think once Bobby Kotick is gone, the cultural shift Activision will be hopefully immediate.
I certainly hope so, because it's frankly disgusting hearing everything that went on inside there and people just turning a blind eye to it. So what type of games do you like to play? Like, do you have what do you play in your downtime, or really what do you do in your downtime in general when you're not busy investigating?
I like to go traveling when the world isn't a complete nightmare to do that in. I've not done that since Brexit was delivered, so that is a whole thing that's going to be horrible to navigate. I like going for long walks. That is, I like exercise and stuff like that as well when I can get around to it. But in terms of games, which is I'm sure what people really want to hear about, I play games on every console. Like I'm fortunate enough I saved up the money before this generation to make sure I'd be able to get everything, and I've now got all three of the Series X now, and I'm playing stuff on everything. This is the first time in my life that I've owned all three of them in a generation, and it is like an incredible luxury to be able to jump between game of Halo, jump onto the PS5 and do a Deathloop run and stuff like that,
Oh, for
so
sure.
Deathloop is the thing I'm playing right now, and I absolutely love it. So I cast a wide net. I try to play as many different games from as many different things as possible, and I really try to broaden my horizons as much as possible and play things that I think I might not otherwise have picked for myself. I listen to what my friends tell me, what the critics are saying. That is, I would not have played Deathloop, I think, had it not gotten such good reviews. But I jumped into it and I really just love it. It's such a cool game. I don't know if you've tried that.
I actually just started playing it recently. I just finished it a few days ago. I'm technically on my first target in the morning. And hopefully when I finish everything up tonight, I'll jump in. But I'm loving it. Like Arcane, I'm just a fan of all their games. I love Dishonored. I adore Prey. And Deathloop is definitely something I'm liking so far. So it's awesome. It's awesome.
But I think it's like anyone who like follows me and stuff knows that I'm like a big like Platinum Games fan.
Same
and,
here.
I love that.
You're among good people here. everything Platinum Games, like I absolutely adore. Like Project GG, like I can't wait to hear more, about that. And so
Oh yeah, that looks great. Yeah.
I'm assuming we're a while out from hearing anything, but I'm very excited. And
Probably.
And Bayonetta 3 too, of course. That looks amazing. If you had to pick 3 games that either A, you felt really made a large impact on you, or B, you were, these are games that you could just play for the rest of your life and never get bored, what are those 3 games and why?
Well, I think the thing that comes to mind, honestly, is Elite Beat Agents on the Nintendo DS, which is it came out like 2007, and I do play that at least once a year, like all the way through. I've beaten it on every difficulty, and the games that it was inspired by, the Awendon games as well. Like, I could quite happily take those 3 to a desert island and just play the Rhythm Beat games that were made by Inus and Nintendo, and they're fantastic. And those are some of my favorite games of all time. Maybe I don't know if you ever heard of Total Annihilation.
Yeah,
I used to.
This is RTS, right?
Yeah, I like a good RTS.
Nice.
And Total Annihilation is the type of game you can play for a very long time because you can just do skirmishes. Or maybe it's like even Halo Wars. I really like. I really like playing a lot of that. Like a good RTS like that, where I can just start a big war is good fun.
Oh, of course.
So maybe Total Annihilation, I guess, and for like the last one, it would have to be something like, like a big open world one that I can really get lost in. Like for me, maybe Skyrim, because there's so many possibilities in it. I know it's an ancient game, but I do love that game. And you could just start over and over again and again, doing different classes and making different decisions in the story and killing characters you hadn't already. And that is definitely a possibility. I can't think. Yeah, and someone says there's a lot of mods. That's true.
Mods, yeah.
I don't know if we can access mods on this theoretical desert island, but there's apparently we've got a PC on it, so who knows?
You can't message for help, but you can go to Nexus Labs and download mods.
Yeah, yeah. What if I create an SOS mod?
People would be like
signaling for help.
People would be like, I don't get the point of this mod. I'm rating it a 2 out of 10 or whatever. I don't understand why this is here. So I guess the last part to that question, what is a game or a genre that is popular? Like, it's popular, everybody likes it, but just for whatever reason, you can say, like, this isn't my cup of tea, or, you just don't understand, like, why it's so popular.
I have pretty broad tastes, actually, so there's not many that come to mind that I am actively turned off by. Like, for me, I used to find JRPGs pretty difficult to get into, but I've started to find my way into them as I've gotten older. I actually try to play as many different things as I possibly can, because I want to be able to write about them, I want to be able to talk about them with friends and stuff. But I would say some kind of more advanced JRPGs where they, it's just like loads of texts, indicators everywhere, damage ratios and stuff that can intimidate me a little bit.
No, I hear you.
Xenoblade was a little bit of that for me, but I did find my way into it eventually. But it's stuff like that, I think, when I see lots of text all over the screen and stuff like that, not really for me. And I guess old school adventure games, in terms of what I'm talking, like Commodore stuff, right. Choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
I'm talking like the early 80s stuff. I don't think I could play one of those. That would be difficult for me to get into, I guess.
You had to really use your imagination. So the final 2 questions. How can people follow you to stay up to date with what you're doing? And then B, what would you tell somebody who watches this or watches you and says, I want to do what Liam does? What do I do?
Okay, so firstly, if you just Google my name, Liam Robertson, you should find me, and all the various people who don't like me saying bad things about me. Not really, not really. But I'm on Twitter. My handle is @doctor_cupcakes.
Oh, awesome.
I don't know why, it just is.
Uh-huh.
And I'm on YouTube mostly. I have a personal channel, but it's not very active. I mostly post on Did You Know Gaming. My series is called Game History Secrets. So if you want to watch some console games, you want to learn some things that you probably did not know about already, the series is all about uncovering things that weren't already public for the most part. And even the things that were publicly known, I mostly try to focus on things that people are unlikely to have heard of, obscure stuff that was maybe lost to time or whatever from broken websites or whatever. So it's really obscure stuff.
Okay.
And I would go watch Game History Secrets on YouTube. And also, if you finish watching that, I did some old Unseen 64 videos that are very similar. But Game History Secrets is the thing I'm doing right now. And you will absolutely learn things about console projects, console, game hardware that you've never even seen or heard of before. So that is where to find me, Game History Secrets. And I am on Patreon if you want to support me. But anyway, that is the main thing, is that series. And what was the second question again? Are you asking me how I, what would I say if someone wanted to do what I do?
Yeah, somebody would say like, hey, I want to do what you do. I want to uncover, these lost projects. I want to deep dive into the history of games that are canceled. What do I do? How do I get started?
I would just say, get yourself a LinkedIn account and, go and freelance. It's very easy to just get a volunteer position at like a small game outlet and just start writing some stuff. If you have an idea, go and talk to an editor and just say, here's an idea for something I want to write about. But the number one tip I would give above all else is just talk to some game developers, just send them some messages. Go on LinkedIn, Google around. They'll be on social media as well, but I think LinkedIn is probably your best bet. And go bother them, don't bother them, but just be polite, be forthcoming. Don't be like, I want to grill you about this console game. Just be like, hey, can I set up an interview? Can I ask you a few questions? Keep it casual, keep it informal. And most game developers are really cool and will want to talk to you, particularly if you want to talk about released projects first. Developers love to tell you about their passion for these things. They're very passionate people,
right?
Creatives who have a lot of interesting stories that they can probably tell you about development. And it is a bit more difficult if you want to talk about recently cancelled projects, or if you want to talk to someone about Scalebound, which was cancelled under pretty weird circumstances. But in general, just do your best. Go talk to some game developers. Don't be shy. There's no reason to be shy. Most game developers are super friendly, and literally the worst thing that will happen is they won't reply, or they'll be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't talk about this. I'm busy." You're almost never gonna get someone who's like, fuck off, asshole. Right. I'm not doing what you like. That has almost never happened to me. I maybe like once out of like 100, I would say someone might be a little bit impolite. But game developers in general are lovely, and you just go talk to them. And I would say, like, if you were to go on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever and find the right people to talk to, I would also say talk to the people on the ground floor, the artists, the programmers, the engineers, the people in the trenches, as opposed to executives who might not give you the real story. So talk to people on the ground floor. They would be more likely to talk. Just talk to them. Just ask them questions, and I think most of them will be willing to give you an interview or at least answer a couple of questions.
That's very sound advice. Again, I am just my mind is just floating in just all this knowledge and just everything we've learned tonight. So again, from complete sincerity, thank you so much for coming on tonight, taking time out of your day.
Thanks for having me. This was really fun, and I can talk for England, so that's fine. I really had fun, and thanks to everyone in the chat as well. Like, stay safe, everyone, and I do this again anytime, so just let me know.
Don't tempt me. I'm gonna bring you. Don't tempt me, man. But yeah, seriously, thank you so much, Liam. Thank you so much to the chat for coming out tonight and commenting. It's been an absolutely wonderful time. For further updates on my channel, please be sure to follow me on Twitter or join the Discord, and I will speak to all of you soon. Have a lovely evening.
Yes, I see you in the comments, Dan, you prick. Making jokes about Factor 5. No, but for real. And some of the developers told me, they were like, right, this project is doomed. If we're gonna build an open world game in Unreal Engine 3, this project is doomed.